Hey, so first of all, welcome. Thank you for hanging out with us today. I wish you were here with us in person. I would have loved to be hanging out with you. It's really going to be strange to kind of talk to a camera, but just know that we love you. We're praying for you. We care about what's happening in your lives. And I really want to do a quick shout out for everybody that is just ministering to people. I've seen so many things on social media and just in conversation about people willing to do daycare or people willing to give food. And so I just wanted to just really thank you for being the church. Thank you for being a light in a dark time, in a dark season. And please know that if there's anything that we can do as a church to come alongside you or to help, please let us know. So call the office, 786-3858. We'll be here, every day, 786-3858. Or you can email us at office@newlife906.com, office@newlife906.com. But we really want to be investing in you and pray that God blesses you. So we'd actually been going through this series called going back to Egypt. And we've been talking about what does that look like and what kind of happens. And so really it's a series on change. Now, little did I know how much things would change today. I did not expect this in a million years that we would be canceling service when it's 30, 40 degrees outside. But here we are. So we've canceled twice, 2 services online that we've done. It's the first time we've ever done that. So at any rate, a series on change and talking about the problems that happen with change and the difficulties and how uncomfortable it is. And so last week we talked about just like the fear that can come and confusion that can happen with change. So, but thank you again for hanging out with us today. The Lord really challenged me quite a bit as I was reading through the Exodus story. And one of the challenges that I had in my life was I tend to look back. And every time there's a new season in my life, this new change, I embrace it for a moment, and because I like the excitement of something new and I like the opportunity for God to move. But I always tend to kind of look back. And when I look back, I almost kind of highlight yesterday, almost as if, man, it was so much better, then. And maybe you deal with that, I don't know, but that's something that I deal with. And so I figured if God's going to kind of rebuke me for always looking back, then we should hang out together and both kind of be rebuked at the same time. That's what the church family does. And so we're just going to kind of just let God teach us both at the same time. So this kind of giving you a backdrop of the story. Israel was in Egypt. It was a place of God's blessing. It was a place that God provided for them during a famine, during difficult times. So Egypt was God's blessing. During the process of time, eventually the Israelites were so blessed in Egypt that they became kind of a snare, if you will, to the Egyptians, or a stink to the Egyptians. So the Egyptians, in essence, were like, we want them gone, or we want them slaves. And so they started, put them in slavery. They started, even their firstborn sons were killed. And so it was just a terrible time. And Scripture says that God heard them, God listened to them, and He sent a deliverer. And it was as Moses, as you might know the story. So a little like between 80 to 100 years happened since God first intervenes, and now finally we're kind of in the scene. The Israelites eventually get free from Egypt. They eventually get out of Egypt after God does huge miracles, huge wonders. They get out of Egypt, and let's just be honest, they're happy. Like if you were in slavery, well, you're going to get, what's it going to be like when we're no longer confined, right? Like, what's it going to be like when we can meet in public again with more than 250 people? Like, we're going to be, woo! So pumped. And so I imagine that's what they were like. They were super excited. This is going to be awesome. And they leaving slavery, getting out of there and going towards a new area that God was leading them to. And so there's freedom, there's hope, there's possibility. And we talked about this last week, that they get just on this side of the river, what's the name of the river? Anybody that's here can remember the Red Sea. Yeah, this side of the Red Sea. And they realized that that they're following them, that the Egyptians are following them, and they're panicking, they're freaking out, they're losing it, and they start saying, man, why didn't you just kill us in Egypt? Why didn't you just destroy us? And God answers, and God says this, you know what? Hey, I'm going to fight the battle for you. Just be still. And you don't need to be afraid. Just be still. And so that's one of the first lessons in change, is recognizing that when change happens, there's a fear that can take place. There's an anxiety that can happen, a fear of the unknown, maybe fear of just of failure, maybe just fear of, it's because it's uncomfortable. And so they dealt with that. But you need to hear this, at the same message that was to the Israelites, that God will fight their battles. The same message to you and to me, that God fights our battles for us. And even today with the coronavirus and all that's happening, I know there's fear, but you need to hear this, that we have no reason to fear as believers, but that God fights our battle, that this thing that looks like it could be an evil moment can actually be an opportunity for us to shine in Jesus' name, reaching people around us. And so that was the first message we talked about last week. So God fights the battle through the Red Sea. The Egyptians are killed. The Israelites get on the other side of the Red Sea, and it's 2 months. It's like 30 days. 2 months are into this deal, and all of a sudden, they start panicking again. But just consider, 2 months. In 2 months, they're saying, God, we wish we were dead. 2 months. They were enslaved for years in Egypt. 2 months of freedom, and they already wish they could go back. So let me read the text for you. So I'm looking at Exodus chapter 16, verses 1 through 3. It says, the whole Israelite community set out from Elim and came to the desert of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the 2nd month after they had come out of Egypt. In the desert, the whole community grumbled against Moses and Aaron. The Israelites said to them, if only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. And then listen, it's so interesting. Listen to what they say. There, in Egypt, in the place of slavery, the place that they lost their firstborn male children, there we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted. Really? You sat around all the pots of meat and ate all the food you wanted? No, they didn't. And I even looked, here's another passage, Numbers. Here's what Numbers says, Numbers 11, 4 through 6. It says, they began to crave other food. The Israelites started wailing and said, if only we had meat to eat. And then listen to this. We remember the fish we ate in Egypt at no cost. Also, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic. They lost their mind. They lost their memory. The only thing they can remember about being in slavery was somehow that they had cucumbers and melons and onions and garlic and all this great thing, and we were fishing and life was awesome. One of the big things that happens when change comes is you start to have a distorted view of yesterday. You start thinking that maybe yesterday, maybe it was better. Maybe yesterday there was better things happening. Maybe yesterday, maybe I missed God. And I'm just telling you, when change happens, first recognize the fear of the unknown, but then watch yourself, because you're going to start to kind of wish you were back where you were. But listen to this. God didn't want the Israelites in Egypt. God didn't want the Israelites in Elim. God was taking them to the promised land. And in our lives, and when it's change that happens, it's because God isn't wanting us to stay where we are, but that he's moving us to a new place or a new blessing, a new location. So fight the temptation to start looking back instead of looking forward to where God is taking you. And that's such a major challenge not to look back, not to keep going back, not to wonder what if and how come, but just to accept, man, this is where God's leading me, and be excited about your future. Listen, every time change happens in our lives, it's an opportunity for God to move supernaturally. He takes the natural frustration that we have, he takes the difficulties that we face, and in change, it allows God to be God in our lives and allows us to be dependent on him. Because the problem when we stay where we are is that we tend to just be comfortable. We don't really need God in our moment because we're comfortable here. We've known this moment. We've done this for years. We don't need God's help. Change will cause you to say, wow, God, I am totally out of my comfort zone. If you don't intervene, I'm not going to make it. I believe that's one of the reasons why God institutes change in our lives. And so today, what we want to do is I'm just going to ask the pastoral staff if some of them would come up, and they're going to talk about change in their life, some of the things that they've gone through, and maybe some things that they're looking at doing in 2020. And so we're excited to hear about that. Also, I want to take a moment to show you some of the things that God did last year. And you're going to see in this video that almost everything that happened last year was kind of a new event. It was a new moment. And if we wouldn't have been okay with change, look at all the blessings that would not have happened last year.
All of us are working together for the kingdom of God, for our community. So every one of you, even the kids, I hope that you'll take a chance to take a shovel full of dirt, signifying just what God is going to do and what he's been doing. And so we're doing so much more than just digging a hole today. We're drawing a line, declaring war against the drug addiction, the abuse, the feelings of hopelessness in our area. We really believe the community center will be a tool that God will use to bring victory in all of these areas. I did a lot of work. I'm taking a shovel.
So, hey, Pastor Whalen, you have been here a little over a year and a half or so.
Yep.
So you have done some change in your life. So talk to me, like, how has change affected you, maybe first of all, and then maybe what are some of the changes that maybe you're looking at doing this year in 2020, especially as it relates to youth?
Yes, so talking about change, a year and a half ago, I underwent the most dynamic change of my entire life, and I graduated college. Might look like I graduated high school.
That explains everything right there.
No, I graduated college in May of 2018, and then I got married in August, and then 2 weeks after that, I moved up here. And so I went through a really dynamic amount of change in my life, and it was good change, but it was still a lot, and it was still happened like all at once. And I remember your message earlier, talking about how we like kind of look back and everything, and I would very easily say that the change that has undergone in my life has been the best thing that's ever happened to me. I have a beautiful wife, I live in a beautiful community, and I am a part of a beautiful church, and I love my job.
And you have a beautiful pastor.
And I have a beautiful pastor, just gorgeous. But even when times can get stressful or tough, or there's anxiety and there's doubt and everything like that, even then I can still look back on my college days and be like, oh man, like I had all those cool guys, and we were hanging out together. The only thing I had to worry about was homework, and it was just like, I'm like, oh man, I wish I would have been back there. But then I think about all the amazing thing that God has done here and what He's brought me through, and how if I would have jumped off the boat, or if I would have doubted and switched earlier in my life, all the blessing, all the amazing people, all the memories that I would have completely missed out on. And so I definitely resonate with that. Like, sometimes we glorify the past behind us, say that, oh, we had this or we had that, and but we can't see the future. The hindsight is 20/20, and so you always get to see what happened perfectly, but you never get to see what's in front of you perfectly. And I think that's where the element of faith comes in so much, because you know what? Hey, I don't see where God is taking me. I don't see where this change is taking me through. But you know what? I trust you, Lord. I know that you have the best for me. So I'm just gonna follow that. So change that is happening in what I'm looking forward to in this next year. One of the biggest things, there's a couple different things that I'm looking forward to, and personal and in ministry, but one of the things that is really excited about for this next year is, starting in June, we are going to take our senior high group, which normally meets on Wednesday night. So if you've been following us, the last year we kind of separated our junior and our senior high with the attempt to really be able to zero in on that age group and what that group of kids is experiencing and speak to that, and has been such a big success in this last year. We've been able to really focus on the different stories that have come out of Wednesday night. Even last Wednesday night, we were talking about doubt and stuff, and we read one of the Psalms that was super depressing, and how the junior highers took that and they came out of it like, hey, we got to turn our blues to yellow, or something like that. It was a really fun story, and then the senior highers, they take it a different way, and so being able to engage that is awesome. So because there's been such a huge success with that, and because we have experienced a little bit of growth with that, we're moving our senior high group to Sunday nights. And the biggest reason in my thought process, aside from the fact that I do really feel like God is calling us to move in this direction, the biggest reason is because I truly believe that there are senior hires, that there are seniors, juniors that can't be here or aren't here because of the day of the night, the day of the
sports and all that.
All that stuff. School used to used to allow for Wednesday night stuff. They wouldn't do Wednesday night practice. It's not that way anymore. I've talked to my seniors and juniors, and a lot of them have conflicts on Wednesday night. And so, if I have to move our midweek event for our senior hires so that there are students that would never be here so that they can make it here on Sunday night, I want to do that. And I know that can be stressful and cause anxiety for some parents. Oh, that's another night. I have to bring it, and
I'm just dumping my kids off.
Yeah,
there's no anxiety here, man. Hey, another night without the kids. Okay.
Boom, free babysitting. No. But for the senior hires, it will allow for that time for extracurriculars and homework and all that stuff that they would be really pressed for on Wednesday night. And also it allows us to be able to use the space that we have in a more effective manner. So I'm really excited about that change that's going to happen. I really feel like God is moving us in that direction, and that we are going to experience a lot of growth in both the junior high and the senior high from that change. And
so with every change, Pastor, there's always some adversity, right? So there's always some downsides. Like how do you think, or what do you think maybe some of the difficulties might be? And then how do you plan on addressing some of those difficulties? Like, how can you use them to your advantage?
So one of the difficulties might be the fact that, like, for a parent that has students in both junior high and senior high, and that's like another whole week. Yeah, you. So,
by the way, it has got to be so hard being the youth pastor to pastoral kids. Like, I would not want your job. I'm just saying.
I actually really enjoy it.
It was got to be one of the hardest jobs to, like, I'm the youth pastor for the senior pastor, the worship pastor, the children's pastor. So I give it to you.
Yeah, well, I actually really enjoy being a pastor kid myself, because I know that position, and I really like being able to speak into that position. There's some times when the parents get in the way, but no, I'm kidding.
It's okay. We'll forgive her.
No. I forgot what your question was.
My question again is, so how are you going to deal with some of the difficulties that might be? You were using the illustration of, I have kids in junior high, high school, different nights. So what do you think about how's that going to work?
So one of the ways is, I think there's two ways I would answer that question. The first way is that for senior high, the reason why we're moving it to Sunday night is because it's easier for senior hires to be able to drive on their own. Some of them are older, they can drive, they can make it here on their own, where junior hires, their parents come for the other Wednesday night classes. So that's part of the strategic thinking there. The other reason is that I would like to see some of the senior hires that might have to come along for on Wednesday night with their parents or something like that, or the junior hires or something, to really get them plugged in more leadership roles or something like that, so that they wouldn't just be some add-on, or it's just not another night of the week that has to be there, that it's something that is actively growing and actively challenging our students.
Yeah. I don't know if you noticed that, but I actually called one of the old youth pastors here, Pastor Chris, and he did the same thing. He transitioned it. He actually came after me and transitioned it from junior high to Wednesday night and high school and Sunday night, and he said it was one of the best things that he did. It helped the high schoolers connect with God more on Wednesday night, so they were in leadership roles within the church, whether it be Rangers or girls ministry, and then I also did a lot of small group ministry. So he said it was one of the best things that he did for the spiritual growth of his group, and I thought that was pretty interesting. So
definitely agree, yeah.
Thank you. So Pastor Jennifer, you are also newer to staff, but not newer to our church by any stretch of the imagination whatsoever. But why don't you talk to us maybe about change maybe you've gone through, lessons learned in that, and then talk to us about maybe something you're looking forward to this year as it relates to children's ministry.
Okay, well, thinking back over my life, I've gone through a lot of change in my lifetime. Most recently, when you talked to me about change, I immediately go back to the day I answered my phone, and you said, hey, how much longer is your contract good for the preschool that I owned? Mm-hmm. And started thinking about coming on staff here at New Life. And that big change. So we did take some time and pray about that, because that was going to be a pretty big change for my family and for myself. So I think back, and it took a few weeks to make that final decision, maybe a month. And leaving the career that I had had for 15 years, owning and operating a preschool, to come into ministry full time was definitely a change. With many blessings and many challenges. I would say more blessings than challenges.
I hope you would say that.
Definitely.
Yes.
But leaving everything that I knew, working within the preschool community all across Delta and Schoolcraft counties, and working with families directly every day, and coming on staff here was a change. And shortly after that change, we had another big change in my life when I was diagnosed with cancer.
Yeah.
And so that whole first year of being on staff and in the capacity of ministering to children and families, also battling and going through cancer, was very challenging, but I have to say that it was God's perfect timing because the support and love that I received from our church family was overwhelming.
It's a great church.
It is a great church, so blessed by everyone. And through all of that, everything that God's blessed me and my family with, and all of the opportunities that we've had to just connect with so many people and pour into the lives of children and families and volunteers and other staff has been just incredible and definitely life-changing. I've seen it change even my children's lives. I think of my boys and how much love and support and encouragement they've received being part of the staff here at New Life.
So what are some of the changes that you're thinking about going through this year as it relates to children's ministries, or stuff that you're looking at doing different or changing up? I know you've actually have done a lot even the last year or so.
Yeah, I think change is a process. So over the last year and a half, we've been kind of reevaluating and looking at different strategies and creative ways of teaching and ministering and discipling children, and creative ways to engage our volunteers and connect with a church family this size. And we have 100 or more children every week in NL Kids, so finding creative ways to disciple those children.
And that's why we can't meet here. It's all those kids.
Probably it's all the kids and their parents that bring them.
That's right. It's true.
So we've been really looking at new creative ways to engage our volunteers, to disciple our children, to grow our children's ministries. And so we have implemented and tried some new things.
Yeah.
So one of the big things that I think is really important is relationship building. When you come to work with children and families, building those relationships is critical. So finding ways to connect the volunteers, the teachers, the leaders with the children and the families. One thing that I asked my children volunteers to do is to pray and think about what ministry they would like to serve in, because we did have several that like to serve, a week in the nursery, a week in special ministries, a week in Kids Zone, and they just wanted to spread the love, which is awesome.
Yeah.
But it also made it a little less predictable for the children. So I asked them to pray about where they would like to serve and try to plug into one area, and that was difficult for several volunteers because they really wanted to spread out. But after praying about that and plugging in with a specific ministry, it's just been amazing to see these teachers and the children in their ministries just blossom and connect, and they look forward to seeing each other on Sunday mornings or Wednesday nights, and they know who to expect in their room, they know what teacher they're going to have, and it's been awesome for our preschoolers.
This year, my understanding is you're going to do a kind of new outreach and piggyback something we've done before. Why don't you just explain that real quick, that kind of change, and then we'll let Pastor Scott share some things in his life.
All right. So this year, each year we do a VBS, in-house VBS here at New Life, and it's always a big success.
It's a vacation Bible school, so
Right.
a big kind of every day for a week, kids coming together, message.
Learn about Jesus, connect with each other, have a lot of fun every night for a whole week. And so we've done that. This year, we have a goal to take a VBS out of our church building and into the community, hopefully into one of the local parks, more like an outdoor outreach, and bring children in from the community. So we're really excited about that.
That is really cool. Looking forward to that. Pastor Scott.
Yes.
So talk to me about maybe a change that you have dealt with and kind of how you fought through it, won it, whatever. Maybe you're still winning it, and then maybe some things that might be happening.
So I wrote some notes down, and the irony of me showing up with this paper with my thoughts organized in a little bit of a fashion is that what I'm going to share goes against this. But instead of really pinpointing, as soon as you presented that question to us, yes, there are many things and specifics that I could have focused on, an area of change, but in my own personal life, I felt like the biggest thing was just dealing with change in general, because I think some people love change, and some people don't like change, and then there's people kind of in the middle. But the truth of the matter is there's always change in something. And how do we deal with that? And so I started kind of reflecting on that in my own life, and believe it or not, being organized is one of my big weaknesses.
And look at you!
And look at me, I showed up with the papers.
Man!
But that will kind of testify to maybe
Drop the mic.
But what I have found, so I started thinking not of a specific thing, but I have thought throughout my life as I kind of reflected back and where I am now and where we're heading, is that responsibility grows. Things, as change happens, our responsibilities grow along with that. And so one of the, last week when you were talking about this, the first verses that came to my mind was Luke chapter 16, where he says, whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much.
That's good.
And so I am not a very organized person. As responsibility grows, though, I find in my own life it requires more diligence, more discipline, and more organization. But it also requires godly character. And so we read that in that verse, whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. And, I know for myself, I'll pray for strength. I pray for discipline and all the areas that God entrusts me with as I look forward to bigger things, as I look forward to the change that's happening. I dream, we all dream, and we set goals, as you've been talking about. God, help me in these areas that I'm already in so that I can move on to these maybe sometimes bigger things. Maybe they're just different things. I don't want to say better things because I don't want to belittle the things that have happened in the past. And there's nothing wrong with that, because this verse is certainly talking about that, about being faithful. We need to be faithful, and God will bless the fruits of our labor. But the verse has a second half that I tend to overlook sometimes, and I think many of us do. And we think that it's just, I think I always read it, and I think it's just restating the first part. And it says, whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much. I'm like, that feels kind of heavy in my life when I think about that verse. And when it comes to my family, when it comes to school, when it comes to job, when it comes to relationships, am I trying to take shortcuts?
Yeah, that's good.
Am I robbing the clock in a sense? Maybe not just punching the time clock at work. Am I robbing the clock from my boss? But am I robbing the clock in my spiritual life, in my time with God, and my family and the things that He's called me to? How am I managing my time? Am I spending too much time on Facebook? If I'm unorganized or spending too much time and things don't contribute to what God has entrusted me with, then I'm really not being faithful with what God has entrusted me with. And the King James and the New King James uses the word unjust in that verse. So whoever is unjust with very little will be unjust with much. Unjust means not based on or behaving accordingly to what is morally right and fair. So I think about that and I'm thinking, man, I could be working really hard. I think I'm a hard worker. I try to be a hard worker.
You are a very hard worker.
And then I'm not looking for that pat on the back, but...
Pat him on the back. There you go.
But I get a little bit... maybe convicted sometimes even about some of that in my own life, because we can be working our hard and trying our best to be faithful with all the things that God has entrusted us with. But number one, what is our motives?
Right.
Are we doing it for personal gain, or and maybe not. Maybe we have good motives, but maybe we're looking for the approval of others, or maybe our priorities just aren't really lined up the way God wants them to be lined up. And I deal with that in my own life. I'm just being open and honest. And, are we putting people's needs and feelings before our own without condition? So I think about when the religious person came to Jesus and he said, Jesus, what is the greatest commandment? And Jesus said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. All the rest of the law is summed up in these two things. How are we treating people? Are we thinking about how the things that we're doing affect others? So, as I mentioned, I'm not very organized, and you might be thinking, okay, well, what in the world does this verse have to do with that? The fact that Scott says he's not organized. And I find when it comes to ministry that the things that I read in Luke 10, they're much easier to live by when I'm disciplined, and I make an intentional effort to be organized. So the more organized I become, the more effective I become in where God has and what he has called me to. Whether that's my family, whether that's my ministry. I say my ministry, it's not my ministry, it's God's ministry, right? And relationships, or even our leisure activities. That might be, outdoor things or the things that we love to do. And, my role, I think about it like this. Whether it's my family, ministry, relationships, or leisure, my family, my role as a husband and father, is the disorganization or the lack of discipline in my ministry and the things that he's called me to, is it robbing me of even ministry to my family?
Yeah.
And so I think about that because my first calling is as a husband and a father. What is morally right and fair is that I treat people, I treat my family, I treat the people around me, even the people here that I work with, the rest of the pastoral staff, that God has placed in my life with love and devotion that he has called me to, and how he empowers me to do that. So some goals for me in the continuation of family and ministry is really to honor God. And I thought about this, to honor God, honor family, honor people, honor the church, honor the community with my time, love, and resources. And in my role here of ministry, that might look a lot like discipleship.
Yeah.
It might look like evangelism. It might look like connecting people as they walk through the doors.
Yeah.
And there's a whole bunch of different things. God gives us all gift sets. We all function within the roles that he has called us to. So it might look like a lot of different things, but the underlying thing is what is the heart of God, and am I being diligent and disciplined in all of that as it relates to change?
Yeah.
Because if it just stays the same, then there's really no growth happening in that. So,
So when you look at kind of that, there's a new role you're kind of taking over this year a little bit, or at least working through it, you and Angie, especially as it relates to connecting people. What are some of your things that you're thinking about doing with that? How's the Lord leading you this year as it relates to that kind of connecting?
Yeah. Number one, starting out with intentionality. And that's such a broad term. But I think that we do, again, that kind of comes with organization, and it's really thinking through a process. And we don't have all the details of that process, but you have mentioned this before. I think we had well over 100 first-time.
A couple hundred
first-time people in 2019.
That actually, so we had around 200, I think, that actually filled out a connection card that were an adult, so the numbers are probably higher.
Number one, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Number two, it's also a little disturbing.
Yes.
Because we need to be retaining people. We need to be discipling people. We need to get them plugged in. And so I think that's very intentionally what we would be looking at is what are those ways, as soon as someone walks through the door, do we make a connection? Right. And I think one of the things that we're going to call is, I'm looking at some things personally. What can I do? What can we do as staff? What can we equip and empower some other people to do? Yeah. But I really think that it's also going to be the entire congregation being aware of that and intentional. Right. And so some practical things that I've been thinking about is like, man, if someone's sitting next to you and you've never seen them before, introduce yourself and just try to make connections.
Just don't shake their hand.
Not right now. Don't shake their hands. And then, the next thing would be getting them plugged in a life group, getting them plugged in with not just necessarily a life group for the sake of getting them plugged into that's important. Yeah. Biblical growth, spiritual growth, all of that stuff, but really looking at what stage of life they're in. So if it's a young couple that comes to the door that has a couple of young children, what are some things happening, or a group of people or activities that are happening that would relate right to them? Yeah. And so just kind of looking at the different stages of life that are people are in, and then getting them connected and having multiple connection points. It's not just one thing, check them off a list, and then hopefully we've kind of thrown them out there and hopefully they can survive. But really have multiple connection points. Get involved in a life group, be serving in a ministry. I don't have the list in front of me. I had 5 very specific things, and I can't think of them off the top of my head.
Maybe by the time when we all meet together, there'll be a list of 5 things that every person will be signing up for. I don't know.
Exactly, So, and that's what it is. And actually one of those 5 things is for some reason, the number 5 kind of stuck in my
Yeah.
head. So it was a list of 5 connection points, a list of 5 things each of us could do.
Yeah.
And also, when it comes to the evangelism side of things and bringing people in, every one of us always be thinking of 5 people
Yeah.
who are unsaved and not coming to church, and praying and inviting those people.
good.
And once those 5 have come, you're not off the hook. You should always have 5 people.
Yeah, that's good.
So
That's good.
I don't know why the number 5, but
Hey, don't matter, man. It's all right. It's ironic. One of the phrases that we really feel like God is leading us to this year. Every year we have like this phrase. What's the phrase? And this year we feel like the phrase is, "Yes, Lord." Yes, Lord. And as you were sharing that stuff, and as you were talking, I mean, those are all changes. Those are all things that stretch us and move us from here to here. And I really pray that our heart can just say, yes, Lord. Not necessarily yes, Pastor Scott, or yes, Pastor Waylon, or yes, Pastor Jason, or yes, Pastor Jennifer, but, yes, Lord, whatever you call me to do and to be a part of, that's what we want to do. And so to embrace that this year, I think, is really exciting. So, thank you guys for sharing. Thank you for watching online. And I don't know what's going to happen this week or next week, but we'll just keep checking up, I guess. And if I can encourage you, find somebody to hang out with, to connect with. Don't isolate yourself. If you have a need, let us know. Communicate that with us. Again, you can call 786-3858. If you have a need, or you know someone has a need, we'll do our best to help with that. And so we'll see what happens.
the Spirit of God is not confined to a building.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so as we worship online, as the message
Yeah.
is shared online, and people might feel like they're confined at home,
Yeah.
the Spirit of the Lord is there, and
Same
there's freedom.
spirit that is here
Yeah.
is there,
That's
and it's
right.
their home and their home and their home. Same God working it all. And we're the
But
church.
don't make that a habit,
No,
because
no.
we need fellowship.
We do need
so
it.
you come back
Biblical.
when you can.
Yeah, in the early church, they met together every day, and that was necessary. So, yeah. So, hey, God bless you. Have a great, great week, and let us, keep us posted. Let us know how it's going.